are listening to the Alchemical Tech Revolution, and I am your host, Wayne McRoy. Good evening, good morning, wherever you are around the world. Tonight, we're going to discuss Trafficking Mirth, the Royal Order of Jesters. You see, folks, there is an organization at very high levels in the Freemasonic community known as the Royal Order of Jesters, and in order to be a member of this organization, first of all, you need to be a Freemason in good standing of very high level, and you also need to be a Shriner, a noble of the mystic shrine, which we've discussed the Shriners in the past here before. So this is a sub-organization above the Shriners, and they have been implicated in some not-so-savory things in this world, and we have the facts about this. This is not open for debate. This is not disputable. This is a true thing. We have this out there in the open literature. In the public domain, this information about this organization, and we're going to explore that tonight. So tonight, we're going to be looking at an article that's titled Royal Order of Jesters, Connection to Prostitution and Pedogate. Their history, verified findings including arrests of a former Supreme Court judge from New York. This is a compilation of various different articles that was put together on a website titled Peaked.com. I went with this one because this compiled all the information in one place to make it very easy to go through the notes. So that's why I chose this, but rest assured the articles are out there and you can find them. There are documents, court case documents, of various lawsuits against this organization, the Order of Jesters, the Royal Order of Jesters from various states. And the allegations are pretty shocking. You see, folks, there's some bad stuff that's gone on at the topmost levels of these secret society groups. And the problem is, oftentimes, many of the authority figures in places of prominence, such as judges and lawyers and the like, high-level ones, are often part of not only this organization, but part of the cover-up. They're complicit in the cover-up of some of these things. We've seen this and we've heard about this in the past in regards to many of the judges and lawyers and officials in the court system being members of some Freemasonic fraternity or another and having sworn these oaths to one another to help each other out. This is not an unknown commodity, but when it gets to high levels of this stuff, some very wicked things have gone on at the highest, most levels of many of these secret society groups. And they cover for one another because, you see, they've infiltrated into these types of positions in various places. And, of course, they'll come up with their own sets of reasoning for throwing these types of cases out. But some of these cases have been prosecuted and tried here and proven. And we're going to get into that here tonight. Like I said, the articles that show the actions of some of the members of this occult fraternity are out there to be found, and the allegations against them are out there to be found. And it seems they've done a lot of public relations work to try to minimize the damage done by the revelation of some of these allegations against them. And a lot of it's been scrubbed from the web now. But you can still find the traces of it out there. You could still find the material out there. It takes a diligent search to do so, though. And that's part of the problem. That's part of the modern day censorship that's coming, that we're seeing being implemented in real time in front of us. Many of these things that at one point were easy to find have now become a lot more difficult with the search engines that we have online here. So this makes it difficult to go back to some of these older stories, because this was around the 2009-2010 time frame that this story hit the mainstream news cycle. It was the early 2000s this was going on, and it was in the early stages of the internet social media craze. And much of this, since that time, has disappeared. Now, I think you could still find some YouTube videos covering much of this if you wanted to explore this avenue of thought a little bit further and find out a little bit more about this Royal Order of Jesters. But we're going to cover some of the basics that we do know and can verify here. And like I said, I chose this format to do it because this website put all of these different articles and information together in the same place to make it very easy to navigate for purposes of covering it on a broadcast here. So that's why I chose this, but I did go back and research some of the other aspects. I do have the actual documentation of court cases about this. I have the original Medium article that was written about this that will be covered in here as well. And we can look at the connections here and the allegations. This is all out there in the public domain, folks, and this is something that's known and it's been accepted as true by the mainstream media. But of course, they will, in fact, cover the tracks of all of it. They will cover up, and they don't want to let this get out to see the light of day. It's not something you hear discussed much. Because, first of all, the nature of this organization, this is a very specific group. It's a subgroup of the Shriners. And the Shriners, let's face it, they have a very good reputation amongst most of the public. They're known for their Shriners hospitals, their children's hospitals, and all of the things they do, the philanthropic work they do to help sick children. So they have a very positive public face. And this besmirches that. And they don't want that. And they do have some highly placed individuals in positions of authority and power. Not only in governments, but corporations and all kinds of other places of social worth out there. So they don't want to let this get out to the public. So without further ado, let's go ahead and we'll read a little bit more here about this Royal Order of Jesters, this subgroup of the Shriners, the nobles of the mystic shrine. According to their tax returns, brotherhood and friendship are best experienced via regular $30,000 parties. There's also no record of the organization donating any organizational money to charitable causes or anything outside of their parties. Then there's a little caveat here. It says this article seeks to cover, first of all, retired New York Supreme Court justice sentenced to prison for sex trafficking, a former Lockport police captain and former law clerk also convicted, verified information that girls as young as 13 years old were involved, some of the history of the Royal Order of Jesters connected to the Shriners, a cursory look at some of their symbolism, what do you suppose it entails, a look at a tax case against them that exposes their true intentions and how they are concealed, information on their link to child sex trafficking, the tie to Nexium and prostitution issue that has gone on for decades, and to see the convictions of a touring company from the Royal Order of Jesters, MSM, and others have desperately tried to keep on lockdown. The mainstream media tried to keep this story from getting out there. So then a researcher named Ryan Bahan, an author, researcher, writer, he accurately asks the questions, why haven't we heard of this? And then he goes on to say, what I'm presenting you has nothing to do with conspiracy theory. Everything in this report is comprised of verifiable facts and information that directly implicate multiple branches of federal and state governments in numerous criminal affairs in at least 3 countries. So why don't you remember any hint of these stories? Well, it's because much of it has been scrubbed from the internet since 2010. You can still find some of these articles and some of these court documents if you do a thorough enough search. And that's what Bahan here is talking about in this next portion. He says he eventually came upon an article searching for this case. And this article is from Prison Legal News, titled Retired New York Supreme Court Justice Sentenced to Prison for Sex Trafficking. This was written originally back in 2010, but likely buried. And he uploaded it on April 15th, 2010. That's when this broke on Prison Legal News, written by David Reuter. Page 18, filed under sexual assault by judges, misconduct, corruption, judicial misconduct, criminal prosecution. And this was in the state of New York. And here's what the article stated. Now, I don't know if you'll be able to still find this particular article. A diligent Google search on my part hasn't produced this particular article, but I have found some of the court documents to verify this, as well as the article in Medium, and of course this information presented here. Retired New York Supreme Court Justice Ronald H. Tills, 74, has been sentenced to 18 months in federal prison for a felony charge of transporting prostitutes across state lines, a violation of the Mann Act. He began serving his sentence on October 1st, 2009. Gonna pause for a second. 18 months for sex trafficking? Really? That's all? Seems like a slap on the wrist, doesn't it? Let's continue. Till's long fall from grace from a well-respected jurist known for imposing tough sentences to a federal prisoner resulted following an investigation into the Royal Order of Jesters, a Masonic group that has 191 chapters and 22,000 members nationwide. Gonna pause again. This is as of 2009. The probe, conducted by the Western New York Human Trafficking Task Force, began in late 2007 after federal agents learned that a judge and a police captain were among the customers of a Niagara County massage parlor that hired illegal immigrants to work as prostitutes. At sentencing, U.S. District Judge William M. Scretany admonished Tills for victimizing the most vulnerable illegal immigrants, quote, the undocumented women involved in the sex trade, end quote. One woman, Coco, barely spoke English and had been sold into sexual slavery. Tills took her across state lines to work at a Jesters convention in Kentucky. Gonna pause for a moment here, folks. And from what we can find available in the public records, this is not an uncommon practice among this group, this secret society group, this Royal Order of Jesters, which is a subgroup of the Shriners. These kind of things are known to happen, and some of this has been said to go on with the Shriners themselves, these kind of things. If you listen to some of what's been said and speculated about by people, you see, the Shriners are known as the partiers of the Masonic organization. They're the party boys of the Masonic organization, and any Shriner will tell you that. Any Freemason will tell you that. That's what they claim. They're just the ones that like to have fun. They like to do fun stuff. That's what they claim. There are a lot of heavy drinkers and stuff like that, is what the claim is made. And of course, it's all presented as harmless fun, isn't it? But there's more at play here. Let's continue with the article here. So further, Tills reportedly engaged in a sexual relationship with a woman who appeared before him in court and recruited her to work as a prostitute at a Jesters convention. Likewise, he recruited prostitutes who appeared before him to provide sexual services at such conventions. And I'm going to pause for a moment here, folks. So this is a Supreme Court judge that took advantage of people that appeared before him in court, and he recruited them to go serve as prostitutes for these Royal Order of Jesters meetings and events that happened. And as we go further, we'll see this extends far beyond this one particular case, as we'll see here. So this isn't just an isolated incident, at least according to people who claim to have witnessed some of this or know something about the inner workings of this group. Although they'll try to save face and say, oh, this was just a handful of bad people. And they don't represent the true intentions of the organization. Let's continue. So it says, I will never forgive myself for the possible harm I've caused to the victims in this case, Tills said at his sentencing hearing. I'm embarrassed and I feel terrible about the shame I've brought to the bench and the bar. Gonna pause for a moment here, folks. So is he legitimately sorry? I don't know. Or is he just trying to save face publicly? I don't know. I can't say for sure. I don't even know if this guy is still alive. This was in 2009. He was sentenced at the age of 74. So it's very likely this guy has passed on now. Let's continue here. So it says the federal investigation also resulted in the convictions of 2 other members of the Royal Order of Jesters, John Trowbridge, a former Lockport police captain, and Michael R. Stebeck, Tills' former law clerk. Trowbridge was sentenced to 2 years on probation. Stebeck received 4 months of home confinement and was required to forfeit the motorhome he used to transport prostitutes across state lines. Gonna pause for a moment here, folks. So you had the judge, you had his law clerk, and a police captain in on all of this. Members of the same order. And they were trafficking prostitutes across state lines. But we'll see, this isn't the worst of all of it. Let's continue. A spokesman for the Jesters said only the group's Buffalo, New York chapter had used prostitutes at organizational gatherings, which was isolated and inappropriate and not condoned by the national leadership. Several U.S. presidents, including Truman and Ford, as well as a number of other politicians, have been members of the Jesters. Gonna pause there again. Did you know that? Presidents Truman and Ford were members of this organization. And of course, like I said, they're going to obfuscate and try to tell you this is just an isolated incident. It was only these couple of bad eggs that did this, and that the national organization itself doesn't condone this. But as we'll see, this is not an isolated incident. Let's continue. There's a quote here from somebody. It says, I quit the Jesters more than 20 years ago, and this kind of thing has been going on at least 40 or 50 years, said former member Malcolm Herring. I quit because I don't drink and I don't mess around with other women other than my wife. Going to one of their events was like going to a whorehouse. Gonna pause. So this is testimony from a former jester who quit the organization because he didn't do this stuff. So let's look into the Royal Order of Jesters and their historical roots. Here is what you find in a simple search of what is left available up front. If you begin searching this group for yourself, you will find that they are connected to Freemasons, and group members have verified this fact. Just a quick look at what Wikipedia reveals. It says the Royal Order of Jesters is a male fraternal organization allowing only Shriners in good standing to join. Admission is by invitation only. A social media jaunt reveals their main office is in Indianapolis, Indiana, and a museum. According to royalorderofjesters.weebly, in addition to the brotherhood aspects of this organization, the International Royal Order of Jesters maintains a museum in Indiana where it showcases historical articles. These range from items associated with the history of the order itself to pieces related to the work of humorists from the past, including William Shakespeare. I'm going to pause for a moment here, folks. Never underestimate the importance of Shakespeare to these various secret society groups. You see, it is held as a point of belief to many of those who have advanced to the highest levels of these secret society groups that William Shakespeare was not an actual person that ever existed. This is a nom de plume of Sir Francis Bacon. That is who they claim William Shakespeare was. Even the name William Shakespeare is a play off of some occult concepts. And this is what's held in high regard by some members of these secret occult fraternities. It's a joke. The joke's on you. Much of what's written in Shakespeare has occult connotations attached to it and hidden meanings attached to it as well. This is why they hold those writings in such esteem, especially organizations like this one. So let's continue on. So it says, according to an Indianapolis site, an organization first formed more than 100 years ago, the Royal Order of Jesters maintains affiliations with the Freemasons and selects new initiates from among members of the Shriners in good standing. Comprising many local courts throughout the nation and one national court, the entity selects a maximum of 13 new members annually through each local court. Gonna pause again. The number 13. Another important occult number. To these people, there's a reason they choose only 13 members per year to add into the fold or invite into the fold of the jesters. And these people are very carefully selected. You see, if you're not somebody that they would entrust with their secrets, they won't invite you in. It's a by invite only organization. So you have to have that pull from above to get into it in the first place. And you only get involved with it if they have some means to control you or blackmail you, much like some of the other things that go on, at least in the political spectrum that we are aware of. So let's go ahead, we'll continue. So these aspects about its history and numbers are very telling. After their first national meeting in 1918, it says the following year the organization began acquiring charters for its courts and grew to include 51 courts and 1,329 jesters nationwide by 1925. In 1933, the organization instated an emeriti membership policy for national court membership and life membership after 25 years of participation in a subordinate court. The 50th Golden Anniversary annual meeting of the National Court took place in 1967 in Washington, D.C., in the Washington Hilton Hotel. Isn't that interesting that it took place in the nation's capital? Interesting. Interesting. Then this next piece in here goes on to list some of the organization's donations and assets, which we're not going to get into any of that because it's not pertinent to what we're talking about here today. But we have these groups, and then we have a description here from, it's called amshriners.com/history. In the case of Shriners International, however, the historic record is quite accurate. The origin of the order and its remarkable growth provide an interesting and factual story dating from 1871, although there are some who contend that the shrine, as it has existed in North America, was founded on some ancient order of orders, which are said to have existed in the Far East at an early day and were conferred upon William J. Florence, founder of the order in New York, while he was traveling in a foreign country. And I'm going to pause for a moment here, folks. In their own words, in their own accounts, and we've gone through this on this program before. We've looked at what they claim their history is, and we could see that they trace their roots way back, even further. The Shriners. And of course, this William J. Florence is one of the people that has conferred this history to us in the books of this organization, the Shriners. You see, these books were never intended to get outside the hands of anyone outside of the fraternity itself. These are intended for their members only, for those within the secret society only. But now we have access to these because of the wonders of the internet. This tool, which I am still convinced to this day, that those key players in positions of power in this world intended to use to enslave us. But for a short window, the information became available for us so that we could disseminate it, and we can use this tool to extricate ourselves from their grasp of control and upturn their cradle of power in this way. So it is an important tool. The internet is an important tool. But this is why they're really ramping up on the censorship now, because they recognize that they lost control of it for a time, and a lot of this information began to trickle out. Even though it was a convenience for themselves to digitize this information so that they could preserve it better for themselves, I don't think they were counting on other people being interested in that information and getting a hold of it. So it's because of their lackadaisical cataloging of this information that we're able to have access to it at this point. But of course, they're trying to double down their efforts to censor this information from public scrutiny. That's why it's important that we look at this stuff. We analyze this stuff and we make it available. Let's go ahead and read on. The Order of Shriners International, so far as the historical record shows, is an American institution. Oriental signs, tokens, and costumes were adopted by those who originated the order for the sake of pageantry. The jeweled costumes, the picturesque Arab and fez, all appealed to the organizers, and the result today is the greatest fraternal order the world has ever known, with 193 shrine centers and Shriners Hospital for children. It is these 22 hospitals, described as temples of mercy, that are at the heart of the order. I'm going to pause for a moment. 22 Shriners Hospitals. That number is not accidental, folks. You see, the number 22 is the number of the master builder. You see how they encode these occult things all throughout everything they do. All the time. There's a hidden message or meaning behind all of that. Of course. But let's continue here. The accepted history of the Shrine of North America dates from 1871. In that year, William J. Florence, a distinguished American actor, returned from a European trip inspired by the pageantry and oriental splendor which he had witnessed at a private ceremony in Marseille, France, given under the sponsorship of the Arabian consul at that city. From notes and materials submitted to him by William J. Florence, Dr. Walter M. Fleming, eminent physician, Civil War veteran, 33rd degree Mason, and Knight Templar, contrived the shrine ritual. At New York on June 16, 1871, Florence and Fleming and 11 Masonic friends endorsed a proposal for the formation of a new fraternal order to be composed of Knights Templar and 32nd degree Scottish Rites Masons. Then, on September 26, 1872, these 13 charter members formally launched Mecca Temple of the Shriners International, with Frater Fleming as illustrious Grand Potentate. On June 6, 1876, in New York, the Imperial Council of the Shrine for the United States was organized, and the next day, Damascus Temple, Rochester, New York, became the second Shrine Temple. By June 20th, 1897, the Shrine had 37 temples, with a total membership of 4,398. The Shrine has expanded to an organization of 193 temples, with a membership of some 300,000 nobles, in Canada, the Canal Zone, Mexico, every state in the Union, and the District of Columbia. Al-Malakaya Temple, which was chartered on February 25, 1888, with 39 members, now has 4,760 nobles' names on the roster. The Red Fez, with its scimitar and crescent, and the Shrine gradually has become the humanizing agency of Masonry, seeking to keep alive in men the spirit of youth by offering wholesome companionship, clean fun, and a welcome escape from the worry, carte, and the drab routine of our daily lives. So notice all the Islam references and influences which also show up in their symbolism and Egyptian icons. And I'm going to pause right there. We've covered this on some previous broadcasts. We've gone back and we've looked at this and we've explained why these things are what they are based upon the notes about the history of the Shriners, where they came from, by Florence and Fleming themselves, pointing back to these details, where they came from, who they really are. And I don't think whoever wrote this piece was aware of that portion, probably never read the organization's book, which we read from, covering that. Now, if you haven't listened to that, go back and listen to the episode called Who Are the Shriners? And then you'll understand a little better what this organization is truly about. But let's continue on. 193 temples. Remember the 93 Club? Woody Allen perpetrated against his 16-year-old girlfriend at an apartment with 93 in the address. Used in Budweiser's logo, used all over for those people to signal their deeds. Think of the plan in 9/11 and how that number appears in other aspects of 9/11. 93. There are these occult ties, and of course the inverse of 93 is 39, which is also an important occult number. 39 can be broken down to 3 times 13, 13 always cropping up, and of course the 3 is an important aspect as well. But it says, as you know, the crescent moon and star are symbols of Islam and used on the hat of the Shriners. I'm going to pause again there. Like I said, I don't think whoever wrote this piece understood exactly what all of the symbols represent. But certainly they have these ties back to Islam, once again, and this is acknowledged within the mystic shrine itself. But you see, they go much deeper. The symbology runs much deeper. But let's continue. So it goes on here to talk about some text in a newspaper talking about the Shriner's article notice about some abortion bill that was pending here. Now, I don't know if this is relevant to the topic or not, but we'll go ahead and we'll read through it a little bit, and if it doesn't seem to be apropos to fitting in with the overall message here, we'll skip past it. But let's go ahead and see what it says. It says, $20,000 hail pending outcome of an appeal on a second-degree murder conviction. The court issued a certificate which said Tucker has probable cause for an appeal to the High Court. He was denied a new trial and sentenced to 10 years to life in the 1963 fatal shooting of Omar Lack Evans. Here for Shrine, we're going to skip past this part. This doesn't seem relevant to what we're talking about tonight. This is a particular court case, apparently, that it's talking about. So then the author of this piece goes on to question information about their tax information. Have the jesters hustled the feds by convincing them that raising millions for partying is a legitimate exempt purpose because the IRS has no problem clarifying them as both a non-profit fraternity and a charity? Their 2005 tax returns, also known as the 990s, showed that the Jesters Fraternal organization brought in over $1.3 million with assets totaling over $1.8 million. That was in the 1990s, or actually that was 2005, excuse me. That was their 2005 tax return. That same year, the Jesters Charitable brought in over $420,000 with assets totaling $835,000 for a combined worth of about $2.65 million. And in that same year, charitable contributions went toward building their new $1.2 million, 5,000 square foot headquarters or museum in Indianapolis, Indiana. This also means that the members can claim their dues as charitable contributions on their tax returns. You see, it is listed as a nonprofit and charitable organization, but it seems it's been shown that they use a lot of the money that they have brought in through donations to set up these elaborate parties. In 2006, Jesters Executive Director Alex Rogers, who is also an attorney and past potentate, submitted an application for property tax exemption to the Marion County Assessor based on the group's claim of being a charity, claiming their new office building included a museum. The Jesters' current website also claims their new headquarters is a 5,000 square foot museum. The site also states for the first time that the museum now includes memorabilia dedicated to the works of William Shakespeare. This Shakespeare connection is new. No, it's not, folks. Like I said, I don't think whoever the author of this piece was understood all of these things that we may have covered here in the past relating to the secret society groups. But he says here this Shakespeare connection is new, as it has not been previously mentioned anywhere in the group's historical or non-profit documentation, including tax returns. If this is truly the case, it must be reported to the IRS as a change in charitable purpose. The application for property exemption was denied because tax authorities were not convinced that the Jesters qualified as a charity based on the museum claims under Indiana law. So then Rogers appealed the decision. When questioned about Jesters' activities, Rogers deferred inquiries to the Royal Director, Gene Best, and Texas Attorney Ron Pruitt. both of whom have not returned phone calls or responded to questions. Pruitt appears to be responsible for incorporating the International Royal Order of Jesters in Texas in 2003 and for obtaining the International Royal Order of Jesters 501c3 charitable classification from the IRS in 2004. Pruitt listed the same address he's reported to the Texas Bar Association as the Jesters' headquarters address on the group's application for IRS nonprofit status. Coincidentally, not coincidentally, both Rogers and Pruitt appear to be practicing law outside of Jesters' headquarters. Both have listed their business address and phone numbers with the Indiana Supreme Court Roll of Attorneys and the Texas Bar Association as Jesters' headquarters in Indiana and Texas. Pruitt was asked via fax why he, as chairman of the Jesters Jurisprudence and Laws Committee, was included on a letter sent by Royal Stage Manager Dennis Schuler to Jester Frank Bailey, informing him that the Jesters had, quote, directed the abolition of all Jester-related bulletin boards and internet sites. The primary reason behind such action was the desire of the board to minimize the extent possible or our public exposure or its access to Jester information, end quote. Pruitt has failed to respond and explain why a nonprofit group would want all bulletin boards and internet sites taken offline. Gonna pause for a moment here, folks. Remember, this goes back to roughly 2010. All of this. The early 2000s into 2010. When questioned about the letter, Schuler denied all knowledge and abruptly hung up. When given another opportunity to answer the question via email, Schuler replied, quote, I do not believe I have any information that would be of help to you. Please stop harassing me, end quote. Since Jesters' functions have always been listed on the Imperial Council's annual session agenda, questions about the group were sent to Shriner's Corporate Communications Director, Alicia Argyes-Lyons, who, like the others, failed to respond. Oddly, the 2008 Imperial Council tentative schedule does not list Jesters' functions. So the second question is, why would a non-profit group with a naked thingy-popping mascot refuse to answer questions and demand such secrecy? Gonna pause for a moment here, folks. Yes, they have a mascot that appears on their pins, and you can look this up yourselves if you'd like, and see what the symbol represents for the Jesters. Is the answer in a 2005 complaint that was sent to and investigated by the Grand Lodge of Texas. It was written by a longtime Shriner/Jester who claimed the anonymous moniker Sam Houston because he says here, quote, what I am about to portray to you could endanger my life and the life of my family, end quote. It alleged that during the initiation of new Jesters, he was offered the opportunity by another fellow brother to sleep with a whore, even though he had a wife and kids waiting for him to come home. The complaint also alleged that, first of all, prostitutes were available for Jesters to have their way with. Brothers had sex in front of other brothers. Brothers held oral sex competitions. Potentates, chaplains, attorneys, judges, and past masters were Jesters. Sex, illegal gambling, and alcohol were the preferred orders of business. Not that messing around, holding oral sex competitions, getting snot slinging, drunk, and gambling your butt off is a bad thing, but to allegedly do so as a non-profit group. I'm going to pause for a moment here, folks. So this is what's kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing that's admitted by those within the ranks of Freemasonry. They know that the Shriners are the party boys of the Masonic fraternity. But this other subgroup above them, the Jesters, is known for taking that to an extreme. So these are all things that have been brought up and brought out to public scrutiny by various people who've made the same claims from various places. These various allegations are the same. Let's continue here. So this is a complaint from an anonymous Sam Houston, who didn't want to put his name out there because he feared reprisal. You see, these people, when they get involved in these occult fraternities and secret society groups, they swear blood oaths not to reveal the secrets of the organization. And if they do so, they know that they will be ritually murdered by some of those other members of the fraternity if they betray their trust in that way. This has been demonstrated in the past. You can look up these cases where it is thought that this is exactly what had happened. The complaint continued that the Jesters pride themselves in having control of all leadership positions at all of the shrine temples in the United States and Canada, as well as the Imperial Shrine leadership. Also, they have risen through the ranks in every body of Masonry, including the Scottish Rite, York Rite, Rosicrucians, Red Cross of Constantine, Eastern Star, and the De Molay organizations. The complaint asked the Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Texas to investigate the Jesters for actions which disgrace Masonry, indulging in the intemperate use of intoxicating liquor, gambling, profane swearing, willfully abandoning their families, cohabiting with lewd women. The investigation yielded no prosecutions, of course not. Here's some information from Sandy Frost in Starbucks, Washington. Going to pause for a moment here, folks. I believe this Sandy Frost wrote an entire book outlining this Jesters organization and some of the allegations against them. So let's read this. There's an editor's note here. It says, this resource was originally created as a public service and published on Wednesday, April 29, 2009, for those wanting to know more about the Shriners' secret subgroup, the Royal Order of Jesters, as well as the former fishing tour operator who took 19 Jesters fishing in Brazil for girls over 13. The original article listed 10 articles. This has been updated with 25 new articles for a total of 35 articles that detail the greatest nonprofit fraud of our time. You can scan the headlines and read the summary of 4 years of findings that include actual dollar amounts from the Jesters nonprofit tax returns available to the public on guidestar.org. The original intention was to provide more information in advance of the April 29th UTMB versus Shriners hearing in Galveston, Texas, and the May 6th and 7th sentencings of 2 Jesters caught by the FBI in a human trafficking sting out of Buffalo, New York. We're way beyond that now. Read on with an adult content warning. Yes, there is sex, but the most offensive, in my honest opinion, is the fact that these guys are operating a nationwide network of prostitution via human trafficking at taxpayer expense. Thank you, Sandy Frost, Starbucks, Washington. The archived link to their website was deleted once their scandal broke out, and it gives the links here below, which if you go to these links, they're not there anymore. These are legit links, but they've been erased. And it also gives some PDFs providing the Jesters' lost tax exemption status in some of the court cases. And I have been able to track down some of these court cases, and I have looked at them. This is real verifiable information, folks. This actually went on. This has been recorded. It's out there in the public domain. This organization has been implicated and has seemed to do everything in its power to cover this up. So then there's a little blurb from, I guess, what would be a book or a website titled From Freemasons for Dummies in 2008. There has been much Who Shot John going on over the burning taper for the last few weeks over the reporting of scandals involving the Shrine's Royal Order of Jesters. The Jesters are an invitation-only group within Shrinedom whose motto is Mirth is King, and is considered by some to be an inner circle within the organization. I'll leave you to discover the Burning Tapers blog entries on your own for the details, but there are at least 2 major investigations going on concerning the group involving prostitution and violation of the Federal Mann Act. Gonna pause for a moment here, folks. So this organization's motto is Mirth is King. Well, what is their idea of mirth? What exactly is their idea of mirth? You have to ask these questions. Let's continue on here. It says, on the one hand, for anyone to say that they are shocked to discover that Shriners having anything to do with prostitutes is intellectually disingenuous. Shriners, strippers, and hookers have been keeping each other company for over a century. And while some of us can sit in the parlor and tisk over in it being antithetical to the tenets of Freemasonry, the Babbittry of the past, combined with the Shrine's post-World War II excesses, has been institutionalized by both the Shrine and the public's perception. Lest anyone forget George Carlin's punctuating 1976 punchline, quote, "Drink up, Shriners," end quote, or 1960s Bye Bye Birdie's musical number in which a group of Shriners think a young lady straying into their dinner is the stripper for the evening. There is no wonder that a certain percentage of men who join the Shrine have specifically come looking for the Shrine they've heard about. They are looking for the secret society that has the strippers and the hookers and the county sheriff guarding the door, who sees they get home okay. Not all men join the Shrine out of altruism, of helping crippled kids. I actually had a man try to sell me on Shrine membership by saying, quote, "You can drink all night for $5, and besides, we blank up the crippled kids," end quote. Is this true, or is this something more nefarious going on with this front? As we saw with the Jimmy Savile case, if you're not familiar with Jimmy Savile, this guy was a scumbag of the utmost order, personal friends with the royal family, and an advisor to the royal family in Britain, who, on record, provable, verifiable, was involved in pedophilia, trafficking children, and necrophilia. This guy was a scumbag of the highest order. This is all public domain. This is all verifiable facts, folks. So is there a connection here? Let's read on. It says, so the Shrine is a conundrum to me. The hospitals are among the finest philanthropic missions in this country, and if they get paid for by grown-ups who sometimes act like high school imbeciles, well, maybe society needs to loosen its corset a bit. Look at what was said about children here. Let's read on. It says, I don't have a problem with Brother Widow's sons posting the lurid details of the jesters on his blog site. Thomas Hardy said, quote, if a way to the better if a way to the better there be, it exacts a full look at the worst, end quote. And if a clot of idiots want to drag Freemasonry into the whore house by association and besmirch the fraternity by whoring it up with underage girls, they need to be exposed loudly, and their local Grand Master needs to give them the order of the boot. I'm not a jester, and couldn't tell you what goes on at their gatherings with any degree of certainty, but I find it especially moronic and irresponsible for the jesters to have an online shop selling t-shirts featuring a cartoon jester climbing a well-endowed woman and burying his face in her ample balcony, in light of the current state and federal investigations into their behavior. If nothing else, it's a little like Bruno Hauptmann leaving the ladder outside of the Lindbergh house. And I'm going to pause for a moment here. So this is all coming from Freemasons for Dummies from 2008. I'm not sure who the author of that work was, but this is from their perspective. Obviously, I think they were members of the Freemasons themselves. So then we have listed here are some more details that are a bit more disturbing. Let's read this. On another mailing list, a Mason made the remark that those who were criticizing the jesters had determined the length of another brother's cable tow. I didn't realize that becoming a Mason meant that Christian morality governed the fraternity. I believe that the King David had many concubines, and for that matter, plural wives. Did the brothers do something that in the 20th and 21st century is considered inappropriate? Well, according to the laws of the United States, yes. When I used to hire a lot of Mexican workers, many of these workers claimed that they were married. These workers were usually found out to be minors, and yet they had children of their own with a young woman who was underage, and they claimed to be husband and wife. Some of these young people were under the age of 16. Now, whose morality are you going to condemn these people with? If ever there was an argument for the shrine to clean up its act or to move away from Freemasonry, it's right there, in a sociopath's relativistic defense of hiring 13-year-old prostitutes to live by the motto, Mirth is king. Mirth is king? Condoning heinous actions because of mirth sounds like a free pass to me to be an abuser and a predator. And now we're going to get to some of the most damning evidence of all against this group. We're going to go to the Medium.com article written about some of these allegations against this fraternity. According to Medium.com, on March 9th, 2008, Buffalo News broke a story involving New York Supreme Court Justice Ronald Tills, Erie County, New York Deputy Michael Lisinski, Lockport, New York Police Captain John Trowbridge, and New York State Law Clerk Michael Stebick participating in a human trafficking operation that involved transporting undocumented immigrant sex workers from as far as Kentucky to New York and Canada. Why? They were transporting the young women to and from a private event held by the Royal Order of Jesters, of whom paid for the sex workers and quiet police transport. In June 2008, former Justice Ronald Tills told investigators that there were about 30 women at the national event and described a network of members who had the ability to supply such women. It was then that he identified Lisinski's renting of 2 limousines that took the prostitutes to Canada. Here is how there could be a connection to what we now know as the Nexium cult. Who was connected to Nexium from Canada? Kirsten Kruek, friends with Allison Mack. She and mainstream media tried desperately to downplay her connection with Mack and Nexium. Both were actresses on Smallville. Here's an excerpt of what Michael Lisinski was subsequently charged and convicted of. Here it is. Lisinski is charged with knowingly, willfully, and unlawfully combining, conspiring, and agreeing together with others, including Ronald Tills, to commit an offense against the United States, that is, to knowingly transport women in interstate and foreign commerce, with the intent that said women engage in prostitution in violation of Title 18, also known as the Mann Act, and that at least one overt act was committed in furtherance of the conspiracy, in that the defendant, Michael Lisinski, on April 18, 2005, did rent limousines in order to transport said women from the Buffalo airport to Niagara Falls, Ontario, Canada, with the intent that the women engage in prostitution. FBI sentencing. Affidavit. As part of his plea arrangement, Tills additionally admitted to engaging in such conduct 5 more times. Another incident in Winnipeg, Manitoba, involving the organization's parent group, the Shriners, looks almost identical. The case in Brazil, mentioned in various sources. Here it is. The case in Brazil. The Royal Order of Jesters participating in sex, drug use, and other illicit acts with Brazilian girls as young as 13. Now we're going to get a little more into some of the details there. And like I said, folks, none of this is conspiracy theory. This is all proven, documented facts that were brought up in court cases, investigations pending, allegations from numerous sources alleging this was going on and that this organization, the Royal Order of Jesters, had involvement in this. Not just some members, not just this group in Buffalo, New York, that they tried to throw under the bus and then cover up the rest of this. There's connections internationally that put this stuff together. Let's read on here. The Jesters were operating under the guise of a local fishing tour company called Wet A Line. The photos, as well as testimony of human trafficking, arose under a defamation lawsuit in Texas that arose when a competing fishing tour company discovered the operation. Despite numerous affidavits and first-hand reports of Masons and Jesters participating in these acts, Wet A Line's attorneys attempted to paint the accuser, Phil Marsteller, as an evil, maniacal sociopath who thrives on bullying and threats. Here's some of the facts. Wet A Line eventually paid Marsteller off the case, settling for $15,000. New York Supreme Court Justice Ronald Tills was convicted and sentenced to 18 months in prison and served 3 before being released. Going to pause for a moment here, folks. The guy served 3 months for trafficking human beings for sex work across international boundaries. 3 months. Erie County Deputy Michael Lazinski was convicted and sentenced to 1 year of probation and a $1,000 fine. Slap on the wrist much, folks? You see, the problem is massive. The infiltration of these secret society groups has been a long-running problem, not only in this country, but throughout the course of history and throughout the entire world. Even when they get caught, they give each other a little slap on the wrist, just to make a good public show of it. Just to get it out of the public consciousness for a while. And they continue to do the heinous things they do behind the scenes, behind the veil. But all that's being torn away right now. We're living in the time of revelation. All those things that once went on in the dark are now being brought to the light of day, and we're seeing them. We're understanding the evils that have been done and are still being done. It's just that which was once hidden from public scrutiny is now out there in the open. And people will shrug this off. They'll say conspiracy theory. They'll say, oh, that's nonsense. Oh, maybe there are a few bad apples, but they always defend these places, these organizations, because they do have this public reputation. I mean, think about that. The Shriners hospitals do help people, don't they? Well, this is one of the tenets of these secret society groups and these occult organizations. You see, they believe that they can counterbalance their bad deeds with good deeds by doing philanthropic works. This is one of the core tenets of their belief systems. So the fact that they participate in debauchery to them doesn't seem all that important, because you see, they do good works to counterbalance that. Well, this is antithetical to Christian theology, first and foremost, and to morality, secondly. But this is what they believe. This is what they act on. And this is why they will go to any lengths to cover up their misdeeds and only promote their good deeds. They know they're in the wrong, but they don't want to be exposed for what they are. Let's continue on here. Lockport Police Captain John Trowbridge was convicted and sentenced to 2 years probation New York law clerk Michael R. Stebick was convicted and sentenced to 4 months of home confinement and was required to forfeit the motorhome he used to transport prostitutes across state lines. He was also given a $5,000 fine. Gonna pause for a moment here, folks. Do these sound like appropriate sentences to you for something as serious as human trafficking across international boundaries? By people who are supposed to be pillars of the community? People you're supposed to be able to trust, who are in positions of power and influence? And they got these light sentences. Do you think that's coincidence? Do you really think the legal system is that broken? Well, I would say it is that broken to a certain degree when you have many of the judges and lawyers who are members of these secret society groups and occult fraternities behind the scenes, who have sworn these blood oaths to help their brothers out of their predicaments. They brush this stuff under the rug. Now let's continue on, because now the writer of this article brings up the Nexium connection. It ties in with the John of God cult leader whose child sex abuse story broke in January of 2019. Long before that, mainstream media and celebrities were heralding him as a hero. I wonder why. Remember, suicides, in quotation marks, are one way the cabal deals with keeping high-profile names covered up and their vast web of deceit under wraps, under the veil of secrecy. That is why they signal with the finger over the mouth in their symbology. Gonna pause for a moment here, folks. So it seems to me the writer of this article has a very basic and cursory knowledge of some of this occult symbolism, what it means, what's involved here, which is all well and good. Of course, we dig much deeper here, don't we? There's a lot more behind it. Then he gives links here to some stories. Here's one from the Daily Mail. Woman arrested, God of John takes life. Suicide. Then there's another one here. It says prepareforchange.net 2019. Woman behind the arrest of faith healer John of God, who was running a sex slave farm, found dead. So I guess these two individuals who may have had some ties to this organization were found dead. They were suicided, according to the writer of this article. I don't know the facts of those cases to verify that or not, but seems suspicious, doesn't it? Let's read on. So it says, John of God had been long heralded by people like Oprah Winfrey and other celebrities as a spiritual leader. It came out when victims started talking about the sexual predatory behavior, which included sex crimes against children, tie-ins to the Nexium slave cult, and baby farming. And then it gives more links here to different stories. Here's one from the New York Post from 2019. John of God cult leader allegedly ran child sex slave farm. Then another one from the Daily Mail. John of God, faith healer, kept teenagers, sex slaves, sold babies. The links are here, folks. I don't know if they still work. I haven't gone to look at them. But these stories were circulating back in 2019, if you remember back. So the writer of this article says they will be covering more of this in depth very soon, and gives several more links here, a plethora of links to some of these different aspects of the case and articles of the case. So let's go in and we're going to look at the Medium article here next, which it gives as one of the main sources here. Uncovering a police-driven international sex trafficking ring that actually happened by Ryan Behan. This was originally written February 9th, 2017, and it talks about this event that happened back in 2009 timeframe. You see, it took 8 years for this to get published in a mainstream source. And since then, they've scrubbed a lot of the facts that came out about this. But here we have the article from Medium from Ryan Behan. What I'm going to present to you in this article will be bizarre, troubling, and very hard to digest. It involves multiple branches of government, law enforcement, and tax-exempt groups soliciting, transporting, and sexually assaulting underage illegal sex workers and undocumented immigrants. The Royal Order of Jesters are a tax-exempt branch of Freemasons, specifically Shriners, that describe themselves as follows, quote, a fun degree with absolutely no serious intent. The motto, Mirth is King, is sufficient to give voice to the purpose of the organization. The Royal Order of Jesters feel that there are times, after our hard work and dedication to family and mankind, when everyone should remember to laugh and appreciate the good work one has done, end quote. And then Behan gives a link here to their former website, which was quickly deleted when the scandals broke. And it says here, they are also a registered 501c10 organization who spend about $125,000 annually on, quote, social functions and meetings for approximately 150 members to promote brotherhood and friendship, end quote. $125,000 for brothers to meet up and promote brotherhood and friendship. Isn't that nice? And then there's a photo here of some of the members of the Jesters with Brazilian sex workers on a boat on a fishing trip, which we covered here previous. According to their tax returns, brotherhood and friendship are best experienced via regular $30,000 parties. There's also no record of the organization donating any organizational money to charitable causes or anything outside of their parties. But there's a lot more to this. On March 9th, 2008, Buffalo News broke a story involving New York Supreme Court Justice Ronald Tills, Erie County, New York Deputy Michael Lazinski, Lockport, New York Police Captain John Trowbridge, and New York State Law Clerk Michael Stebick participating in a human trafficking operation that involved transporting undocumented immigrant sex workers from as far as Kentucky to New York and Canada. They were transporting the young women to and from a private event held by the Royal Order of Jesters, of whom paid for the sex workers and quiet police transport. And some of this we've covered already. We've covered this. The FBI was involved as well. So we know we've already covered this case. And there's pictures here that Behan had posted. He says, these pictures I've been posting, they're from another investigation in Brazil of, you guessed it, the Royal Order of Jesters participating in sex, drug use, and other illicit acts with Brazilian girls as young as age 13. So the Brazilian government was investigating the Jesters for this. And of course, we see here, the Jesters were operating under the guise of a local fishing tour company called Wet A Line. This came out, and it shows pictures here of some of the Jesters fishing with young girls on a boat. Despite numerous affidavits and first-hand reports of Masons and Jesters participating in these acts, Wet A Line's attorney attempted to paint the accuser, Phil Marsteller, as an evil, maniacal sociopath who thrives on bullying and threats. And they paid him off to the tune of $15,000, and he went away. And of course, we know what happened with the case here in New York. And then Behan asks again, well, why haven't we heard about this? And he goes ahead to point out that these guys were given special treatment and covered up. Well, why does this kind of thing go on? You see, folks, it's because Many of the people in positions of power in officialdom belong to some of these secret organizations, these secret society groups, and they have sworn blood oaths to help their brothers get out of trouble in this way. So we have all of these different allegations against this Royal Order of Jesters. We have court documentation. We have all of these different findings against them. We have all this information available in the public. And when you look back at the occult ties that they have, and just what's come to light here, you have to wonder what else goes on behind the scenes that we haven't heard about. Because you see, we know that there are human trafficking rings which operate in this country and around the world. And they seem to be super secretive and super organized. And we've seen some of the connections here to this particular organization, which operates at the highest, most echelons of the Shriner organization. There are allegations that have come forward. And these aren't the only ones. There's other court cases. I have another court case here from Minnesota where a guy alleges that all of this is going on. There's this trafficking going on. And the judge that was presiding over the case threw the whole thing out because the guy didn't fill out the paperwork properly. And then he went on to also impose a stay on the case so this guy can't file any further actions in this particular case again because he didn't file the paperwork properly. And he doesn't have, quote-unquote, evidence of the things he alleges, even though he supplies evidence in the documentation he gave. But because he went over the word count of the affidavit, of what's allowed in the affidavit, the judge threw the case out. And this is just one example. And there are other court cases that have been documented here. One of the other ones that we talked about earlier was this one where an anonymous source who called himself Sam Houston filed an affidavit against this organization, alleging these same things. And this is coming from different parts of the country, different people altogether, verifying some of this same information. And it all gets brushed under the rug. You see, folks, many of these secret society groups are complicit in many of the criminal things going on in this world. Why is that? Well, it's because the secrecy they impose upon their members is a perfect cover for crimes against humanity, isn't it? If you have somebody who swears allegiance to your organization and swears a blood oath and takes a blood oath to protect the secrets of the organization from outsiders, and they know, taking that blood oath, that if they violate that, they will be ritually murdered, that tends to keep people quiet about things, doesn't it? And when you also consider much of what's been done in these secret society groups, it's the same thing that goes on in politics. You don't get to be a big player in the game unless you can be blackmailed in some way. Unless they have something to hold over your head to keep you going along with whatever it is they want and keeping quiet about it. That's how it all operates with these organizations. Now, here's the thing. A lot of people will come out and defend these organizations because the fact remains that the vast majority of people who get involved with Freemasonry or even in the Shriners, they don't have the first friggin' clue about a lot of this stuff. They are just the surface level members. They don't advance very far in the hierarchy. They don't get into the inner circle. They are the broad power base. And they will deny any of this stuff going on because it has not been their experience, because they're not in the inner circle. Many of them don't understand that there is an inner circle, and that you only get there by invitation only. Only if you're found worthy, or they find traits in you that they see as being something they can work with. This is how they maintain not only their secrecy, but also their positive image to the public. Now, the Shriners are a perfect example of this. And a lot of people that do get involved with these organizations, they don't have ill will or bad intent. But you can also find out, if you talk to Freemasons or Shriners, they are publicly acknowledged to be the party boys of Freemasonry. Of course, they'll tell you it's just good, clean fun they're having. But it's been well established by many that they often partake in alcohol, debaucherous things in some of their events that they organize. And we see this, an example of this, especially with this Royal Order of Jesters, which is a very highly adept group of these Shriners. You only get there by invitation only. You have to be a Shriner in good standing. And to be a Shriner in good standing, you have to have made many, many blood oaths already at that point to maintain the secrecy of the order, not to withhold or not to reveal any of its secrets to the public at any given time. And oftentimes when people do get so deeply entrenched into this organization, they decide they better keep their mouth shut about what it is they do know, if they know anything. Because they know the penalty if they do reveal the secrets. The thing is, there are spiritual ties and bonds that go with this as well. And this is often overlooked by anybody who explores the machinations of these secret society groups. They overlook the spiritual aspect. There are spiritual entities and or powers, forces involved. And you are bound to this spirit or this spiritual tie that's given you by this organization. And it gives this spiritual tie free reign in your life, whether you realize it or not. And many will deny this and not even look at this in regards to this type of a notion with these secret society groups. Many people join thinking that they're just getting involved with a philanthropic organization that does nice things for the community. They want to be better people. They think that joining this organization makes them a better person somehow. That somehow they will learn some mystical truth that the rest of the world doesn't know. And they're led down a spiritual path, which most of the time leads them astray from a true relationship with God, the Creator, or a true knowledge of spiritual things. You see, they are fed many false doctrines. They are lied to by the higher-ups in the organization on purpose, acknowledged in their own writings. They lie to their lower-level members about the true nature of what it is they're involved with, of the meanings of the symbols they use, and all other aspects of these things. And yet people still will join these groups. Oftentimes it's because of the social status associated with it. They want to get a square deal down at the car dealership, don't you know? They want to have preferential treatment in business dealings, in court dealings. They know this. This is an acknowledged thing. If you're not one of us, you're nothing. That's what Bill Cooper used to say about the Freemasons, what they said. This is one of the things that they firmly believe, too, in many cases. They think they're somehow better. They have a leg up over everyone else. They're part of the in clique. They're part of the big club. At least they think so, but they're really not. They're just the useful idiots for the true controllers of this world. It's the broad power base, as I alluded to earlier. And most people who get involved with these organizations, they don't have the first clue what they're getting involved with. They don't know what the spiritual associations are with it. They don't know what spiritual powers are guiding and directing these organizations. They don't understand the things that go on behind the veil at the topmost levels of the inner circle of these various organizations. They just think they're getting involved with something that will make them better men and does good things for the community. And as an added benefit, well, they get a square deal down at the car dealership, and they have preferred treatment in business dealings and court dealings. And many don't go any further than that in their learning. In fact, the vast majority of Freemasons and Shriners have probably never read even one of their books to understand what's been revealed to them. They just go through the initiation ritual and are led by the nose, by those above them, swear allegiance and the blood oaths, learn the secret handshake, and the little wink-wink, nudge-nudge to identify themselves as a brother. And this is what constitutes the broad power base, which are actually the useful idiots for those of the inner circle to get things done that they want done. And most won't even acknowledge this fact. In fact, they'll tell you I'm mistaken about this. That's not what the organization represents. That's not what their experience has been. I've had some of these people reach out to me. Tell me I'm wrong, I'm full of crap. Even though I read directly from their own books, who they identify themselves as. This comes directly from these organizations, folks. This is not me making stuff up. All of this tonight that we're talking about the Royal Order of Jesters, it's out there in the public domain. The information is still to be found. A lot of it's been brushed under the rug. But through diligence, you can still find this. These are documented facts. This organization has had some level of scrutiny raised against it for these various crimes that have gone on. And still, people will defend these groups. It's really a sad state of affairs because this has become problematic because it creates a spiritual stronghold in various areas in our world and in our society. And if you don't even realize it's there, well, what are you going to do about it? Absolutely nothing. And many people are unaware that it's even there. And then they wonder what hinders progress in their communities, in their areas, in their society, in their culture? What hinders spiritual growth? Why do things keep sliding in a negative direction? Well, it's because these spiritual strongholds have taken up residence, and they have massive influence, not just within the secret society groups, but within the community that these secret society groups reach through their quote-unquote philanthropic work. Who would dispute the fact that the Shriners' hospitals do good things? Well, certainly they do. They help sick children. But what's the spirit behind that? It's a deceptive spirit. It's a deceiving spirit that sets up this spiritual stronghold. And don't get me wrong, most of the people that operate or work within the Shriners' hospitals, they don't have the first clue about any of this. They don't have any ill will or intention. But they don't understand the spirit that's taken up residence in the community where the Shriners' hospital is at. Now, I know a lot of people will probably have a problem with me saying such a thing. That's okay. You could take umbrage with it all you want. It doesn't negate the fact that there is a spirit behind this that is a deceptive spirit. It doesn't negate the fact that these organizations believe that it's through the balance of their good works with their debaucherous works that they can find apotheosis or find salvation. They can build their own salvation through the balancing of their good works with their bad works. That's one of the spirits that manifests behind this. And like I said, it is a stronghold, a spiritual stronghold, and it takes up residence. And it affects whole communities, whole areas, entire cultures. And this is what's at the heart of it, this inner circle, the things they've done. It goes to show you what the spirit is, what it truly represents, even though it puts on a good public facade. Are we not informed? That Lucifer can appear as a spirit of light. Indeed. Just a lot of things for us to consider, but anyway, we have covered here ad nauseum what is a known and provable fact about these connections with the Royal Order of Jesters, which sits atop the Order of the Mystic Shrine, which also sits atop the Organization of Freemasonry. And we've seen and we've established the roots of this organization in previous shows here. You could go back and take a listen to that if you want a little more context to understand what this really is, what it represents. And then keep in mind what has been established here as a spiritual stronghold as a direct result of the actions of these secret society groups and occult fraternities. And this may be a bridge too far for some people to consider, but certainly I'm just presenting you what it is that I know, presenting to you what is verifiable through their own accounts. What can be known about this, and what my intuition tells me about it. The information is out there to be found. And you can verify these things for yourself if you use your discernment. You pray for discernment. You can understand why our society is in the shape that it is. When you understand these spiritual strongholds that have been set up all around us without our knowledge, and the influence that it has, like I said, many people would denounce that idea. You can say or think what you want about it. You can apply your own discernment. You can do your own research into these things. You can go and take a look for yourself. I don't ask you to believe anything I tell you. Go and look for yourself. You might be shocked at what you find. Certainly, we are living in interesting times. We're living in the age of deception. But we're also living during the time of revelation, where the veil's being torn away, and the things that were once done in the dark are coming to the light of day and are being seen for what they are. And I think it's important to expose these evils. It is my mandate as a Christian to do so. So take it for what you will. I would say that what we can know and verify about some of these groups should give you a rough idea as to what it is they represent. So, submitted for your assessment, there it is. Trafficking Mirth. What kind of mirth are they talking about with the Royal Order of Jesters? Well, you can know a tree by its fruits, can't you? And we've seen the fruits. Anyway, I want to thank you all for tuning in. I will remind you that I do appreciate each and every one of you. We'll catch you next time. Have a good one now.